I'll record the class for her. So
Okay.
one good resource that I used a lot when I was making this lesson is here, and I'm gonna link that in the chat.
Literacyideas.com.
But
Okay.
I just found it through random chance, but it has some good tips that I've included at the end here. So the idea here is we can break English down into, let me make sure the timer is set. We can break English down into like the written part and the spoken part. And
Okay.
we have phonemes. Have you heard of phonemes before, Chu?
No.
So a phoneme that's where phonics comes from, right? Or telephone. It's the word for sound. So we have discrete, that means separate sounds in a language. English has 44 different sounds, 26 letters and 44 sounds.
It's double the size.
Yeah, a little over double actually, because double would be what, 42? But yeah, double the sounds. And then we have graphemes. You know the word graph? Have you heard graph before?
Yes.
So graphemes are, hold on, let me fix my sound. Graphemes are letters and combinations of letters. So
Is it like blending?
it's right, it can be, or it could just be a single letter. Like, for example, we have B, which makes the B sound, or we have CH, which makes a ch sound. Except when it makes a k sound. Certain words it will make a k sound similar to a K. Like chiropractor. It makes a k, but we have church where it makes a ch. Okay, anyway.
So this is graphemes.
Hold on one second. My sound is, this is what?
So this chiropractor and church, do you refer to graphemes?
Graphemes. It's at long E.
Graphemes. Okay.
Right, graphemes. Yeah, I'm talking about the grapheme CH and how a single grapheme, which is CH can be used to form two phonemes in phonics. So we have the ch sound, right? Like church, and we have the k sound, like chiropractor. Okay. Hold on, I'm trying to fix my sound. My laptop does this.
Can you hear me? You can hear me.
Yeah,
Right?
I can hear you, but your voice is cracking. It's my computer.
I see.
The way to fix it is if I unplug and replug my computer several times. Okay. Can you try to speak? Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, good.
All right, so
how do we know when we read the word that we never read before is ch or k?
you don't.
Because it's two phonics.
You don't really. That's why it's useful to know. I have this lesson that Carol and I already went over. Maybe I'll send you a copy, or I'll send you a copy for sure. It's my morphemes lesson. So if you recognize certain morphemes are the basic building blocks of language. So they're basically like the molecules of English. So if letters are the atoms, then morphemes would be your molecules. If you know that, like, for example, like Cairo, that's a morpheme. If you know that that's commonly used, then you can recognize it when you see it again. So anyway, that's one way to tell, just by learning these things like teach, right? That's a morpheme meaning to educate. So teacher, right, is someone who educates. I'll send you this lesson.
Okay. How could you, how would you remember all the Thai's names?
The Thai
Their
names,
name, yes, their name is,
just
but it's not
practice.
making sense.
Just practice. The Thai language is actually more systematic than English in general. There are weird morphemes in Thai too. Like for example, you have Suvarnabhumi Airport. This airport is called Suvarnabhumi.
Not Bhumi.
Suvarnabhumi, not
No.
Bhumi. Yeah,
Oh.
because Thai comes originally from the Indian languages. The
Sanskrit.
Indian- yeah, right. So in Sanskrit, it has a bhumi sound. And when they changed it over to Thai, they just kept those Sanskrit spellings. You see it a lot in like the days of the week in Thai. So I don't want to go too off topic, but it's useful to talk about English too, because in old English words, you'll see the old spellings, like Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Wednesday comes from the god Woden, Woden, or Wodin, depending on how you spell it. It means Woden's day. Woden was the old god, like the king of the gods. Just like Thursday comes from Thor, Thursday.
Oh, I see.
Right. So Wednesday is spelled strange. Like we say it like Wednesday, like Wendsday, but it's spelled in this way. Anyway, you have a similar thing with Thai where certain words that go back to before Thai was a language are spelled strangely. A lot of place names. I'll just
Understood.
quickly show you the days of the week in Thai. So you have,
Time, week.
this one is straightforward. So here you have this was Wanjan. It has WANJANTR, and this mark means that it's silent. So it's pronounced Wanjan, even though it has a TR at the end. So
Oh,
it goes back to the old Sanskrit spelling. And then
oh.
we have Wanangkan, even though it ends with an R in Thai, when you end with this symbol, which is Ralua, it becomes a N sound. So it goes from an R to an N.
Angkang.
Yeah, so English has some things like that, but not quite as. Thai is confusing in its own way, but for the most part, Thai follows rules. But there are these old words. But because English also does the same thing, it has words from German and French. Almost every language has donated something to English besides the Asian languages. Even some of those, like pajamas, you've heard this term?
Yeah.
Pajamas is an Indian word.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Pajamas.
Oh.
Yeah, it came from, because Britain ruled over India, and
Yes.
they liked the way the locals dressed when they went to sleep. They wore these loose fitting, comfortable clothes called pajamas. So the British,
Before they rule India, so how do they call pajamas? How do they define what?
they just took the
Attire.
local, they just took it directly from the local culture. So the locals were wearing something called pajamas, and the British said, oh, that's a pretty good idea. We'll also start making and selling pajamas and it became very popular for people in the West to wear pajamas around bedtime.
Do you mean those days before they rule India, they don't wear pajamas?
Right, yeah. It came around the same time as the British Raj. The British Raj is the term for the India under British rule. I think Malaysia would have been under British rule around that same time.
Yes, correct.
So yeah, there are some Asian donations to English language, but they're not as common as the European ones, just because, you know, English, just the proximity, like they're close together, Europe and England
Okay.
and America. So anyway, back to phonics. So the first thing we'll just go over, I think this is a good overview. Can you read this paragraph?
The key to helping students to read is to build phonemic, correct?
Yeah.
Phonemic awareness, which is something you can do with them out loud. This means to develop understanding that there are discrete sounds in a language. How to read is for phonemes.
Phonemes. It's a
Phoneme.
E. Yeah.
Phonemes and written letters and combinations of letters, graphemes,
Graphemes. Yeah.
play word games. For example, what word do we get if we replace the, you want me to read the phonic B or B?
B. Yeah.
B. Make the B sound. When I read B, do I B or B?
Second one. B. We talk about that here. So this is something I got from that site I showed you called Lazy Vowels.
Oh.
So example, can you read here?
For example, when pronouncing the K sound, make it crisp and short. K.
Yeah, you were right. K,
Oh, K.
rather than adding in an extra sound at the end. That way, when students have to blend the sounds together, it's much easier for them. For example, if I teach my students, I've made this mistake before. Like if I tell my student, oh, what is this? K is K, K. Then when they go to make kite, they're gonna say K-ite, K-ite. And then they'll say kite, kite. Rather than if you just say K, 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 then they'll know kite, kite. It'll make it much easier for them to combine them.
Okay.
Anyway, so you need a little bit of at the end because a consonant is hard to say by itself, right? Like it's easier to say t than it is t, but t is more accurate. I guess just be careful with it. You know, you don't want to be going t for T because then the student will try to do TikTok and they'll go ik, ok, right? Or tick, even worse, tick, talk. You have that with Japanese
This happens to a lot of Chinese
yeah.
Chinese students.
I was gonna say I've heard it with Japanese, but I haven't had too many. This year and the latter half of last year is the first time I've had a lot of Chinese speaking students. But anyway, Japanese, the language has at the end of everything or u. So they don't have like just consonants at the ends. So they'll often say like, instead of size, they'd say saizu,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Anyway, so if we replace the b sound in bat with m, the response would be mat. So students should know how to, even before they know the letters, they should know how to repeat sounds back and then mix up the order. So,
Mat.
right. And then they could be able to go cat, right? And for them to know the difference between C or K at this stage, stage one, it's not very important. Stage one, they don't even have to read English. They're just learning sounds. So you try to get as many sounds as possible. This is when you say like, what sound does the cow make? Moo. You know, what does the clock make? Tick tock, tick tock, right? What does the bell sound like? Ding dong, something like that, right? What does the police car sound like? Wee oo, something like that. So you want to go ahead and read this paragraph for me, Chu?
In the first phase of phonics teaching, the focus is placed mostly on teaching children how to recognize certain sounds and some simple words. This helps to improve children's awareness of the sounds around them, laying important foundations for the phonics work that will follow in the later phases.
Right. So they should learn environmental sounds. That's like the ones we talked about. Instrument sounds. So, or instrumental sounds, like the sound of a piano, the sound of a violin. Do you know what body percussion is? It's like, or like hitting your body to make a sound. Percussion is when you strike something to make a noise. So you can teach the children to make a sound, or they can slap their head, you know, something fun that they'll enjoy.
Okay.
Rhythm and rhyme. So this is like where you come in when young American or British students are learning. The teachers will teach them little rhymes, right? Like Jack and Jill went up the hill, those types of things. So
a lot of children books.
Right,
follow
yeah.
Rhythm and rhyme.
Yeah, almost all children's books that I've read anyway, they have some sort of like rhythm scheme or a rhyme. It's like reading really easy poetry, right? Something like that. Alliteration, which means repeated sounds.
Repeated what sound? Which one?
All of them.
Sound.
I mean,
Okay.
for example, like the hard one is Susie sells seashells, right? But you could also do an easy one like Bob buys books. What does
Like
Bob
tongue twister?
buy?
Is it like a
if-
tongue twister? Tongue twisted.
They tend to be alliterative, but alliterative is the adjective form. But when you alliterate, you just repeat the first sound basically. Like Bob buys books with his brother. So the student can see Bob buys books with his brother. It's something that's easy for them to practice the same beginning sound. Alliteration is like, it's like rhyming, but with the first sound, where the first sound is the same, right? Rhyming is where the last sound and the vowels are the same, like took, brook, look, the vowels are the same, but alliteration is where the consonant at the beginning is the same. Voice sounds, so basic phonics, and that also falls into oral blending and segmenting. So oral is having to do with the mouth, right? So oral blending is when we take different sounds and mix them together. And then segmenting is teaching them to to cut one word off. Segment means to break into pieces, like just like our annelid worm has segments, right?
Mm,
Each of these little lines is a segment.
mm,
That's where the word comes from.
yeah.
So segments in language are just little independent pieces. So having those pieces, you can start breaking things down. Like, for example, good, you can break down into g, d, right? That might be even too hard at this stage, depending on, you know, the type of students that you're teaching, but super easy. We're not yet reading, we're just doing sounds. I guess that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Animal sounds I mentioned are good for this stage. So have you used any of this in lessons before? Or teaching a child?
Yeah, my girl, 3 years
Mhm.
old. And she learned from YouTube, thanks to YouTube. She
Nice.
learned all the sounds from YouTube. That's where I noticed about her. I mean, kids, their brains are very pure and they can accept and absorb any kinds of information. Then they will bluntly articulate everything that go through their brain. Then only I know which one she's lacking of, which one she is strong at.
Because she
Then
doesn't filter, because she just speaks what
Yes.
she's thinking. Got it.
Yeah.
I think the other like important key to why children are, that's good for like checking up on how advanced they are, etc. Another cool thing about the way that they learn language, which we can try to do as adults, but it's much harder, is like the purity of going from, for example, if I'm a child, I don't know what mud is. So when I was a baby, my mom said that I would say like goo-ah when I saw mud, right? I would see mud at the side of the road and say goo-ah, goo-ah. So like the child will start to, you know, I was concerned about the mud, right? When we were walking or something. So I would say goo-ah, mom, goo-ah, goo-ah, like to avoid that thing. And then later I understand, okay, that's called mud. But the way that kids learn language is from directly from their senses, translating that into a sound, which is cool, you know, even before the writing.
How do you teach kids to recognize? It means if let's say they already know all the 26 letters of basic phonics, the hard part is blending. Like
Right.
let's say strawberry, when we put STR, they confuse.
We'll get to that. So STR is called here a trigraph. So I have a bunch of, this stuff really should be separate, but I put it all in the same document. So we have trigraphs and digraphs. So here,
Tri is 3,
yeah,
is
tri
3.
is 3. Where's my trigraphs and digraphs?
You can
Okay,
search.
here, yeah. Here's digraphs. I have a lot of digraphs. Diphthongs. Diphthongs are where things, like, this is something that a lot of people have trouble with. We'll get to that later. It's like where the vowel doesn't stay at the same level, but it changes. So anyway, we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Like, we have this one, like boy, it's a boy, toy, steroid, avoid. It's not a straight oi. Yeah, no, it is. It's like your tongue is going oi. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. Trigraph. I have it here somewhere. Anyway, so your trigraphs, groups of 3 letters that form a sound. So not to be confused with consonant clusters. I think, what was the example you gave me?
Strawberry.
So strawberry is actually a consonant cluster. So we have s, t, r, strawberry. It's actually a consonant cluster, just like SCR, scramble, right? You can scramble eggs, or you can scramble to make or to write a paper on time, means to hurry or to mix. So we have things like consonant clusters, which are separate from trigraphs. Then we have groups of 3 letters that form a sound, like TCH. You know that one? What sound does it make?
TCH.
Ch, ch. It's always at the end in English. So like hatch, scratch, itch, stitch. It's a t plus a ch, so a ch, but it comes together to make more of a ch. The t is very subtle. You could probably just ignore. What's that?
Is the word chateau comes from France?
Chateau, yeah. It means castle. This one, I can't spell it. A-U-A-E? No.
Chateau, C-H-A-T-A. Is it T-A-E-U or T-A-E-O?
That's it. It's E-A-U.
E-A-U.
Chateau. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's this part is a consonant, this is actually a vowel trigraph. Like, yeah, that's a good one. Chateau. So chateau means castle in French, but in English, it just means like a fancy house. Right? A chateau literally means castle in French, but in English. We also have things like beautiful, right? That's a good example of a trigraph. E-A-U, right? I also have I, air, ear.
How do we read entrepreneur? There's so many ways of reading that word.
You said it correctly. Entrepreneur. Entrepreneur.
No.
It's like this. Entrepreneur. Entrepreneur. Yeah. Another French word.
Oh.
Yeah. Anytime it has that sort of weird EU or EAU spelling, it's always from French.
Sorry, start with EN or.
If it has this EAU or EUR, EUR, EAU, it's always from French. Like something called the fleur-de-lis. Fleur-de-lis is a shape that's popular. Sorry, I spelled it with the wrong center. So a fleur-de-lis is this shape. So floor means flower. So yeah, it's a shape.
Whenever there's EUR, we read or.
Yeah, generally.
EAU is
O. Or it can also be U, like beautiful. It's actually a diphthong with beautiful, because it's not a steady vowel. It goes up and down. beautiful. That's beautiful. You like that. Beautiful. You. It actually doesn't have the sound. I'm thinking of Thai, but with English, it's you, beautiful. English has no sound that goes there's nothing like that, and it doesn't have, I don't know, it's easier to talk about what it does than what it doesn't have.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, you're correct in your pronunciation of entrepreneur.
There's one more word. I can't even spell. Miscellaneous.
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 You're correct in your pronunciation.
Miscellaneous.
I believe that's probably French too.
Miscellaneous.
Let's see. You can just, if you want to know where it comes from, you just search the etymology. Etymology is the history. Okay, it's from Latin. So Latin miscere means to mix. Miscellus is mixed. So that became miscellaneous, mixed. Yeah.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah. You also see that in all sorts of, you see it in Indian even. There's a theory that the Indian language, Sanskrit, also comes from Latin, or that Sanskrit provided words for Latin, or there was some sort of language exchange going on. Because when Europeans discovered India, like when they first traveled to India, they found that a lot of the words were similar, not super similar, but enough. They shared enough traits that they started to think that there was some sort of connection.
So do you think when we watch those movies, especially talking about history, those scripts were not actually the actual words during that time?
It's hard,
Whatever
yeah,
we are watching,
it's
whatever we
pretty
are watching,
hard to know unless the people were, because we don't have like audio of them. The best indicator of how people spoke is when they make spelling mistakes, actually. So, for example, we know how people in early Britain spelled because when the monks were writing down words, sometimes the monks would make a mistake. The monks were like one of the few classes of people that could read and write. So when they were writing down words in English, sometimes they would write a mistake, and the mistake would be because of the way the spoken English was, right? The same thing with Latin, like Latin, the language of the Romans. When they were writing, sometimes they would make a spelling mistake, and then we know from that spelling mistake that that's closer to how the word was actually pronounced. So yeah, that's how they figure out, that's how people have been able to figure out how, or to guess at least, how these old words were pronounced. Because the mistakes will come from the way people hear it and speak it. Like if you're writing deer, right? Maybe somebody will write it DEER, right? Instead. So, or DERE. So that was actually really common a long time ago because people didn't have dictionaries all the time, you know, and their teacher might have taught it to them wrong. They were separated by distance, you know, they couldn't quickly travel around. So a lot of factors. But yeah, that's how you can try to guess. But like in the case of Latin, they just have to they use modern Italian and some other sources to try to approximate is the word, like to get as close as possible to the way those people would have spoken. All right, so we were on part 2. Yeah, so now we go to phonemes. So phase 2, phonemes. This is where we start moving from sounds into the phonemes themselves. So now you're going to start showing them some words. So as children, can you read through this?
As children move through the phonics level of the scheme, teaching begins to focus more on the sounds that letters symbolize, otherwise known as phonemes.
Phonemes, yeah.
Phonemes.
Yeah.
In total, there are 44 different phonemes used in the English language. Phonemes can be made up of 1 or 2 letters, and in phase 2 of teaching phonics, the focus is placed on the most common single letter sounds. These sounds are often broken down into
many native speakers, sorry to interrupt,
Often.
because it's an interesting point. Many native speakers will get lazy and they'll just say often, like without the T, but the correct way to say it is often.
oftenly.
Oftenly is not a word. You would just, often is already,
Yes.
often already describes oftenly, so we don't need to add an ly.
Yes.
Like often is already an adverb. Anyway, continue.
Often broken down into smaller groups so that children don't get overwhelmed with too much information. The order of teaching these phonemes,
yeah, correct,
can vary between schools and teaching schemes, but the most common phonemes are usually taught first, such as t, s, n or n.
N. As close as you can get to n. With,
N
yeah.
and e.
Eh.
Eh.
Yeah. The E sound is also a way that we can get that
Always
from I.
Yeah, we have confused I and E.
Right. And the E makes an eh sound. So these are the most common, these are the most common phonemes. There's a chart of the most common sounds in English. So you can use something like this, like E. This one is E. I don't like this. I don't use this. These are like these symbols. Don't use these with kids. They're too hard. But anyway, E, E, U, E. Actually, I'll let you. What do you think these sounds are? Starting with E.
E. E.
E.
E. U.
Good.
Good.
U.
Oh, okay.
U. Yeah.
E. E. Teacher.
Yeah.
Bird. Also
Yeah, it's an This is like a bit more E, like teacher, and this is a softer one, like bird, but it's pretty much the same. Anyway. Or. Yeah, or, and. E. Eat. Yeah. And far. Yeah, this one is interesting because with any word that ends with a consonant and an R, it's going to be different depending on whether the speaker is British or American. Americans will say far, far, but British will say fa. So American English is closer to the way that it's spelled. That's why most people that, for example, I have a student whose father is Scottish and whose mother is Thai, but her accent is American, even though I'm the first teacher she's had who's been American. The reason for that is because students growing up without a bunch of different accents to learn from, they're generally going to pronounce words the way that they're spelled. And if you pronounce words the way that they're spelled, you'll pretty much end up speaking American English. That's why American English exists. It was former British people removed from Britain, so they just spoke things the way that they were spelled.
So Irish speaks differently?
Irish are closer to England.
Yeah, their accents are different.
Yeah, I have examples of accents.
Okay.
Because I'm not good at doing them myself. I'm not like a comedian who can do different accents, but like it's a thing with like Harry Potter, you know, an American would say Harry Potter, but a British speaker would say Harry Potter. They would not Harry, like Harry Potter, something like that. So the Harry Potter, something like that. So they're skipping the way that Americans say the H sound is huh, but British people will generally skip the H and just pronounce the vowels.
Why is that?
Why is that? I'm not sure. It's just a very old way of speaking.
Oh.
It's called the British accent, the main one anyway, is called received pronunciation. And it's very old. It goes back a long time. If I had to guess, it probably comes from speaking very quickly or something like that. Harry Potter. You could say it more quickly than Harry Potter. But
no, we won't skip the first alphabet, no matter how. I don't know. What is it so rush for them to say that word?
I'm not sure. Also, there's a theory that the American accent was actually spoken by British people around like the 16th century, so like the 17th century, so around 1600s. In England, there's a theory that they were hiring tutors to teach their children to speak exactly the way the letters were, to basically make their phonemes as close as possible to the graphemes. And those wealthy people or educated people, then when some of those people went over to America, they were part of the like wealthy companies that set up shop in America in the beginning of the colonial period. And then they taught English in that same way.
Because you remind me the movie of The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
That movie, I couldn't understand any single word without a subtitle, especially Tom Hardy. I can't even hear what he said because his accent was totally going against the actual word in the subtitle.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a while since I saw Revenant. I remember a lot of the movie is him like screaming. Like
because I think the lack of words because of the level in the society. They are not the elite group, so the lack of words. The only way to express is by shouting and screaming. Yeah, which makes sense.
It does make sense. Also, he's like by himself a lot of the time, or he's with people that don't speak the same language as him, like the Indians. But I remember he's just like getting hurt. A lot of that movie is just Leo getting hurt in different ways.
Yeah, correct. Yes. Understood.
So this is when you start with the VC and CVC words. By phase 2, they should be able to read like VC words, which are like it. Usually when people say CVC, they're including VC. Like my flashcards have it, hit, can, they have at,
Uh,
and they even have some ones that have like are more advanced, like snap.
snap.
Snap is harder, because it's not really CVC, it's CCVC.
CVC.
Yeah, because it has CC, it has a consonant cluster at the beginning, like S plus N, so snap.
Ooh.
And then we go to phase 3. That's where things get more complicated. So phase 3, you want to go ahead and read here?
Moving into phase 3 involves learning about the rest of the phonemes that weren't. This is the hardest one. I don't even weren't.
You
Do we
said
need
it
the
correctly. Weren't. Yeah, you do
Weren't.
say the R. Or sorry, you say the R and the N. Weren't.
Okay.
Weren't.
Words covered in phase 2, including 2-letter sounds and more complex phonemes such as digraphs, correct? DI?
Digraphs and
Digraphs and trigraphs.
right.
Alongside the rest of the phonemes, there is another collection of 12 new tricky words which need to be learned, including my, they, and me.
Good. So this is where we introduce the Y sound. Y is tricky because it can be used as a consonant and as a vowel. It can do the Y sound, and it can also do the E or the I or the A, depending on where it's put in the word and depending on what consonant you use it with.
I think the most confused part is E and I, the sound. Like completely. And the students read complete lie.
Oh,
because they
right.
thought I.
Yeah. This is where things like start to not follow the same rules, right? You have words like LEY, you would think would make a lay sound, but like you said, it makes lee completely.
My.
I mean, there is a reason for that. So the reason we have the completely is because at the end here, the eat at least is easy to understand. So you have E with another E after the consonant that makes an eat sound. We get into that here. So these are called split digraphs. A split digraph is where we have a consonant, then a vowel, then a consonant, and then another vowel, usually E. Actually, it's only E,
Cake
I
is
think.
long vowel, is it?
Yeah, it's a long vowel. So like instead of cack, it would be cake. Instead of fac, it's fake. Instead of phlegm, it's flame, right? So that's always hard for students who are sight reading because they're gonna go, okay, C-A-K, before they get to the E. If they're just reading from letter to letter, then they're gonna say cack, but it's cake. It's important for them to know that the way these work.
The word Coke, C-O-K-E, is not a real word actually, right? It's a short form of Coca-Cola. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's become a real word.
It has become they registered that word, Coke?
Yeah, it's registered, but also as it actually is a real word. It means the stuff that they use to make steel.
Oh.
It's like, it's like very carbon, this is Coke. So it's like carbon rock, and they make it really hot and combine it with iron, I think. So yeah, Coke comes with iron ore and limestone, and they put it all together in a big furnace, and that's how they make steel. So there is a Coke, but this doesn't come from the Coca-Cola or from the Coca plant. You have cocaine, which is a drug, right? And that comes from this, the same root as Coca-Cola, from Spanish coca. So that's where all these come from. So yeah, so coca is a plant, and the reason that people use cocaine as a drug is the Indians in these regions used to chew on the plant, which if you chew on the leaves, it starts to like numb your mouth a bit, and it like acts as a very mild drug, almost like coffee. But then if you use chemicals with it, you can pull that chemical out of it, and if you concentrate it enough, it makes it into a very strong drug.
Okay.
Anyway, so which came to the cocaine came to the West as a medicine, and then quickly people got addicted to it.
I see.
Similar to a lot of like morphine, same thing. Morphine is still used as a medicine.
Lies in medication industry, correct? Morphine.
Yeah, so morphine, you know where it comes from?
No.
The word itself comes from Morpheus, who was the god of sleep and dreams.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was used to, you know, if you use enough of it, it'll put someone to sleep, and then you can perform surgery on them. That was the idea of morphine. It comes from a type of flower, a poppy, where they cut the fruit of the flower, and then they extract the latex from it, and then they can make morphine from it. Anyway, so
we were at phase 3.
What's that? Yeah, we were at phase 3. So we have my, they, me. We talked about completely. So by the end of phase 3, children, can you read?
Children should be able to recognize all 26 letters of the alphabet and recall them by name. They should also be able to blend and read CDC words made up of the graphemes they have learned, and be able to correctly draw the letters correctly when copying from an image. Is that correct? They're two correct.
It's correct. So this is where you give them your classic like tracing book, where it has like an L, and then they need to write an L on the line below it. Like something like you have like an L and then a space for the student to write, so they copy the L. Like it might say CAT, and then the student has to write CAT, and then it might say RAT and then RATE. So they need to be able to read rat and rate, something like that. So I have examples. Go ahead. I have examples of digraphs.
Sorry, you want me to read where?
You're good. I think you finished everything.
Oh, okay.
Good. So digraphs. Sure.
I watched this series called Inventing Anna from the Netflix. It's very hot nowadays. So there's one sentence by this lady. She said, I mean, they are in the middle of arguing, in the midst of argument. She's asking, where should I sit? This or this side? Actually, is in the court. The scenario is based in the court. So very obvious, this is the defendant side, this is the plaintiff side.
Mhm.
But she is neutral. So she said this, I am Switzerland in this situation. Is this an analogy to show that she is
I am what?
I am Switzerland. I
Oh,
am
Switzerland. Yeah.
in this situation.
Yeah. It's because Switzerland has an official policy of neutrality.
So does it mean this is an analogy?
Analogy. Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Yeah. Correct. Analogies are where you, yeah, what you just described.
so meaning say that analogy not necessarily to be an opening in a speech. It can be used, mix and match, depends on situation.
Yeah, of course. Like, so if you say like, his wooden attitude towards something, like you're saying that just like wood, he's like old and unchanging, like his attitudes don't change. It's like a way of calling someone super conservative, like he's wooden, his wooden attitudes. Or you could say, like those two have history together. That means like they had a relationship in the past. And then someone makes a joke, yeah, Germany and Poland, like two countries that fought in the past. Or Israel, if someone says, oh, those two, they have history together, right? And it's like, yeah, Israel and Palestine, like two countries that fought a lot, right? So you can, another example of using analogies of countries, you know, using countries as an analogy to talk about human relationships.
So it's a very lame joke if the other person don't even understand what I say. Not in
Yeah,
that
I think most people will understand the Switzerland thing, though.
Mm.
Yeah, but I think if you watch a lot of series, they're always trying to be clever, and in real, like normal day-to-day speech, people aren't usually that clever. They tend to use things that are, they don't have to, for a series, when people are speaking, someone wrote that dialogue, like they had a team of writers writing down what those people are going to say. So often they say very clever and witty things, but in everyday speech, we don't have someone writing what we're about to say. So
Yeah.
you'll hear, I don't think I've ever heard someone say that I'm Switzerland, but it's understandable, you know, it's something that people will get.
Okay, it depends. If the person get it, get it. Cannot get it, that's it.
Yeah, right.
Okay, understood.
But if you want to play it safe, you could just say I'm neutral here.
Mm.
But yeah, that's a good example of an analogy.
Okay. I'd like to learn more on analogy. Because,
Analogies, sure.
yeah, because the way we speak in normal days, it's kind of boring. I mean,
Yeah.
it will never help us to use up our brain.
You have
Because
metaphors.
Analogy, we have to use up a lot of brain juice.
Right. Brain juice. Metaphors. Metaphors are like when you say, when you use words to like, in a non-literal sense, like the wind howled is a metaphor. The wind howled at me, right?
Oh,
And then similes are where you say like something, like he was like, or her tears flowed like a river, something like that. So
cry me a river
similes,
is also a metaphor.
cry me a river would be a metaphor, probably. But similes, if you said her tears flowed like a river, then it's a simile. And then an analogy is like a more complex thing where you say, you use a like, okay, like when I want to explain something to you, I use an analogy. So I'd say like the Switzerland thing falls into like a metaphor. I could be wrong there, but I'm usually not wrong with this grammar stuff. So with an analogy, you use something to explain something to someone. So you use a different situation. Like your teacher might say, all right, so it's a good analogy. I don't know. We'll come back to that. I'll think about it.
No problem. Okay. I think plenty of analogies out there.
You could say like CVC words are sort of like think about a sandwich. Like if I say, okay, Chu, I want to talk to you about CVC words. Think about a sandwich. Your bread are the consonants and your meat, that's the vowel. So that would be CVC. You have bread, meat, bread. That's your consonant, CVC. That would be an analogy, using the sandwich analogy to teach about a certain type of word. Anyway, yeah, we can talk about metaphors, similes, analogies.
Metaphors.
It's just using, with metaphors or analogies at least, you're using, let's focus on analogies. You're using things that are commonly known. Like you're using common knowledge to explain more difficult concepts, or in the case of that Inventing Anna show, you're using a metaphor to make a joke. Or sorry, you're using a analogy to make a joke. I think actually that was a metaphor, but anyway.
How do we know that's a metaphor or that's an analogy? Analogy means using something common to explain something
Yeah,
not common to that person.
right. I don't know. Let me check on that and I'll get back to you by the next lesson. Yeah, comparison between two things. So yeah, analogy is when you have one thing and then you explain it using another thing. So you're comparing two things. Or like a boy is to a girl as a man is to a woman, something like that. But it's pretty complex versus a metaphor. I think that a metaphor, yeah, I'm positive that what they used on the show was a metaphor. Because you're writing, it says when you're using a metaphor, you are writing a phrase or a word while actually referring to something else. She said, I'm Switzerland in this situation, when she's referring to I'm neutral in this situation. So it's like a substitution.
Okay.
Whereas in analogy, you would say, like, let me make an analogy, like me, my wife and I were like a lock and key, something like that.
Okay.
So we have no, KN. These are consonant digraphs. These are common in English. So these are different than consonant clusters because they make one phoneme. You know what I mean by that?
Okay.
So each of these make one phoneme, like KN, N, CH, Ch, PH, F, right? It can also be very rarely, no, I was gonna say it makes a P sound sometimes, but no, not really. Ra, right? Wrench or wreck. And why do we keep the W? It's a good question. We could drop the W, and maybe in modern, maybe as English gets more and more modern, people will drop the W. It's entirely possible.
Mm. Tick.
Mhm. Tick or pluck,
Oh. Check.
chess or class. So the s, it's just the same as having a single S. The reason we use the double S is to make sure that that person isn't confused to think that it says cheese or clays, right? If you spell it
Oh.
like this, then maybe the person would read it incorrectly.
Yes. Oh, I see.
So the double S enforces the idea that there isn't an E there. But some of these don't have a point. Some of these just come from, like, similar to Thai, they come from old language.
Okay.
So ch,
Ch, ch, rich, rich, ch, ch. So only this 12, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
yeah,
10.
those are your consonant digraphs.
Something
There might be some that I missed, like RT. No, because RT makes two different sounds. I think that's all of them.
How about RH?
Yeah,
Rhino.
nice. That's one.
RH.
RH, rhino, rhombus.
Numbers.
Yeah, we can try to ribosome. It's a part of a cell. Actually, I think that's spelled like that.
What is ribosome?
I think it's just spelled with this. Ribosome is a part of the cell. If you look at an animal cell, it has ribosomes. They're related to protein.
Mm. How about CY? Cycle.
Uh,
CY.
yeah, but I think that's just an example of a C making an S sound. I would say that it's similar to rice, right? Where you have CE makes a S sound here. It's just like in the beginning, we talked about how C can make a S sound or a K sound.
Mm.
I forget where we read that, but it was somewhere.
Mm.
All right, we'll finish the rest of this on later this week because I think we're out of time.
Yes, this coming week. Yes, you still have class. All right, good.
All right, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.